Yas and I today are going to be talking about baby-led weaning. I just started baby-led weaning with my 9-month-old about 2 months ago, and it's gained a lot of traction on the internet. So we're going to talk all things about how I source my food, the resources I use to build my baby-led weaning journey, common mistakes that people make, and some things that might just give you peace of mind on how babies start to eat and how they process their foods. Today we're excited because we're talking about baby-led weaning. And one of the reasons we're talking about baby-led weaning is because recently my Instagram, if you guys have been on my Instagram recently, I've been doing a little series recording my 9-month-old. She's 9 months now.
Oh my gosh, I can't handle it.
And I've been recording her reactions on her rating my baby-led weaning. And so I have all of these questions about baby-led weaning, which is funny because sometimes I feel like when you've done this is my 4th time doing it.
Yeah.
I just feel like everyone knows about this.
Right.
But now I'm starting to realize the more I'm doing polls on Instagram that
there's a new generation of moms coming into
it's so true.
You know.
And actually I looked up the definition of baby-led weaning before we started this. Because I was like, how do I actually explain this? Because to me, I've only ever done it, but it's basically the opposite of what our boomer moms did. So it's you know how our boomer moms did pureed food.
Yes.
And we just took spoons and just put it in the baby's mouth. Here comes the airplane. So baby-led weaning isn't just about the kind of food. It's about them following their hunger cues. Okay. Because they're leading it, baby-led. They're leading the weaning process.
Right.
So baby-led weaning, technically, a technical description would be that you give your kids soft foods on their tray that they get to pick up and choose to eat with their own hands. So they are feeding themselves. You're not force feeding them. Mm-hmm. But it's not like pureed foods. You can obviously babies can't grab pureed food. You're giving them soft foods for them to eat themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about the fact that you just connected this to our parents' generation, our generation right now, because now I'm sifting through all these conversations that my mom has had with me over the last 3 babies of why don't you sit down and eat them with a spoon? Why aren't you feeding them with a spoon? And I'm like, I don't know. This is just easier. It's a totally different headspace. So that makes a lot of sense.
I was in charge of doing that as the oldest of 4 girls. I remember the spoon that my mom had. I remember licking the baby food lids whenever it was pears or peaches or whatever.
Wow. Not the I'm triggered because I remember my mom doing that with my little sister, but it was the spinach and the peas. And I'd be like, no, how dare you? That might as well be dog food. What are you doing?
Also, I don't know if you've read any of the current studies about baby foods, but a lot of them have been they've been finding arsenic and
arsenic.
But even there's BPA in the lining of the baby food jars. And stuff.
It makes sense.
Yeah. So recent investigations have revealed significant concerns about toxic heavy metals such as arsenic, lead, cadmium, and mercury in baby foods. These metals naturally occur in soil, making them hard to eliminate, but some cases have shown that there's been considered unsafe for infants.
Yeah.
Also in rice cereal. So the FDA guidelines focus on a few products like rice cereal. So there's, a new bill being produced. Crazy heavy metals, which are so hard for your body to detox.
Oh my gosh. These poor babies getting heavy metals. As a mom of a toddler, all I'm thinking about is how to remove heavy metals from my child. And the fact that we introduced that so many heavy metals at infancy
in so many ways,
whether it be through vaccines or through products or through now food.
I know,
pre-processed food,
right?
That's
and
really
also
annoying.
That's one of the main reasons for inflammation in babies' brains is the heavy metals, and which creates people say their baby has a colic or they're all these different issues that we're seeing are being now connected to brain inflammation, which is also being connected to heavy metals.
Right. Makes so much sense. It's just crazy. I'm really hoping that we'll be able to see an impact with our food quality for not only children, but for infants coming in the next couple of years, that this will be taken a little bit more seriously.
Maha.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what it's called? Make
America healthy again. Maha.
Maha.
Okay, so let's dive in a little bit more. I love that you just introduced baby-led weaning's process now versus then. What are your thoughts on why do some parents prefer baby-led weaning over other maybe the traditional method.
I actually think that baby-led weaning is so much easier. When I think about like having a little jar of pureed food, like you have to be like sitting there like spoon feeding a baby. Like, it takes time. So for me, with baby-led weaning, one of the main things we give Meadow is sardines.
I
Right?
love that out of all of your children, you just referred to her as Clementine.
Oh,
Could have been Fleur.
No,
Could
no,
have been,
no.
it was
And only Clementine and Meadow are like interchangeable to me. But yeah, so I think about like sardines. So like, I just like literally like open a can of sardines and I like break it up into pieces and sprinkle it on her plate. And then I typically have her high chair pulled into the kitchen because I'm typically preparing food or doing something in the kitchen. So I sprinkle it on her plate and she sits there and she picks it up and just like eats it herself. And like, I don't know, I just think it's so much easier.
I agree.
And you don't have to like if you think about people like, I remember when I first became a mom, I had like a baby food making like kit.
Yes,
you like steamed it and then you and you pureed it and then you like froze it and then you like thawed. Like baby-led weaning is like it just cuts out it cuts out a lot of the messy work.
Yeah,
you're not blending, pureeing, freezing. You just like steam a carrot and then like chop it up and sprinkle on the plate.
Agreed. Yeah, I agree. I think for me, my approach has definitely been efficiency.
Yeah.
While they're playing and eating and discovering, I'm able to get something done.
Yeah.
So that makes a lot of sense. What are some ideal ages or development signs to know if a baby is ready for baby-led weaning? When did you really feel like, okay, it's time?
I think that like every mom has their own personal preference. For me, because I'm in such denial that my babies are growing up, like I want to delay eating as long as possible because I want them to be a little newborn baby.
Right.
But my kids aren't like other kids in this sense. Like they are like lunging and trying to grab food out of my hands at a young age.
Yes.
So really,
I remember like Meadow at 4 months. Doing that,
being super interested,
yeah.
like just trying to any way she would get her hands up and stick it in her mouth right away. So when they're sitting up and they can hold their head up, those are two major signs. Like you don't want to be feeding a baby that can't keep their head up. Definitely not.
Yeah.
Sitting up, holding their head up, and they're showing a lot of interest in food.
Yeah.
So if they're watching you put the food in their mouth, they're trying to grab food out of your hands. Those are kind of the signs that your baby would be ready to start.
And wouldn't you say ideally like waiting till 6 months? I feel like we've had a conversation about this at one point. I know at least with grains specifically, you've talked to me about waiting on that a long time, which I think we should get into that later in this conversation because I remember that being like a really good piece of information that I've held on to. But I know that there's been like a lot of information out there about like, no, you can start introducing as early as 4 months, but at 6 months, I know you can talk to like the development of our intestines and all that stuff. Do you want to go into that a little bit?
I explain to people like it's similar like our fontanelles in our head. Like we have these bones in our head that aren't completely fused when baby's born. It's similar to our intestines. So there's gaps in the intestinal wall.
Right.
And that's a good thing because when the baby is taking in the mom's milk, they're able to absorb. It's like a very like think about like a fence that has like really big gaps in it. Like a lot of things could pass in and out of that fence. It's a good thing when you're giving baby breast milk. It's a bad thing if you're introducing food that they're not ready to digest yet, because what happens is it passes through those gaps in their intestines and it gets into their bloodstream. It creates allergies. So things like gluten, that's like a really big molecule that the baby's gut isn't ready to break down yet because it doesn't have a lot of the certain enzymes you need to break down gluten. Right. So amylase is the enzyme that's needed to break down gluten. Lipase is what their belly is full of, and lipase is what breaks down proteins and fats, which is what the mom's breast milk is made of.
Yes.
So you want to be giving your baby proteins and fats way more than complex carbohydrates. Yeah. Way more than like, I don't know, like even like complex fibers and stuff like
complex carbohydrates and fibers being like even like sweet potato and like really hold off on like starches.
Yes.
And things of that
nature. And if you give your baby starches, then like making sure they're like really cooked down well. So like if I'm going to give, like Meadow had a bunch of carrots, not a bunch, but like had a few bites of carrots a few days ago because they were in a stew. But I had been cooking that stew in like my own bone broth and they were like super soft. So I was like, I don't mind her doing that. But you can tell what's being digested and what's not in their poop. If you feed a baby, like I gave her some figs off my fig tree a few days ago. And like she basically pooped out these like whole figs.
Wow.
Like, you're just not ready to break down figs right now.
Wow.
You know?
So that's good to know. So like when you're seeing non-digested food coming out in your baby's poop, that's an indication that actually their gut is not able to break that down yet.
Which is important really because your gut has villi, they're like hair-like follicles, and then they have microvilli, which are like hair-like follicles on the hair-like follicles.
Okay, wow.
And those, like, you just think about almost like as like rented like coral or like sea anemones.
Yeah, that's what I was
And
envisioning.
yes, and they're on the inside of your gut. And what those villi do is they're absorbing nutrients and pulling it into your bloodstream.
Okay.
And the reason why you have villi is it increases the surface area of your gut. So it's not just like the walls of your gut. You have like all of these. It just increases the surface area. So what happens when you have undigested food running through your intestines is it's actually breaking off those villi and microvilli,
Wow.
and it can really damage your gut. Well, you don't want undigested food coming out in your stool. You want
Right.
you want to be breaking that down in your mouth, and then you want your stomach acid breaking that down,
Right.
and then you want your intestines being able to absorb. You don't want there to be a bunch of undigested food in there.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
It's so crazy because even with Zara 6.5 years ago, the pediatrician was telling me, okay, now is the time. She's 6 months. Now it's the time to introduce her to cereal, rice cereal, da da da, all these things. I was like, really? Rice cereal? And I mean, it started a horrible journey
Oh, did you
into
do it?
food.
Did you
Oh, I
do it?
did it because I didn't have
Right.
community. I didn't know
Yeah.
anything better. I was still kind of like in a place where I wasn't fully trusting my gut,
Right.
even though I felt like that does not actually seem right.
Right.
But I feel like I feel a pressure because of professionals telling me to do it,
Yeah.
that I should do it. Plus, my mom being, again, that was like what they grew up
Right.
with. That's like what they were told. And so I tried it, and it started a huge journey of
Right.
constipation.
That's what I was gonna say.
And then fixing the constipation,
Yeah.
which then the Marilax and then all the things was like,
yeah.
it started a whole thing. But I like had all these beautiful ideas of baby-led weaning Zara, and it just was like a really hard start due to introducing rice cereal.
Choose rice cereal. Yeah, it's crazy. Like, because I used to be an infant nutritionist,
Yeah.
and I remember that was part of like what people would start their babies on, and being like, you don't have to start your babies on that. I'm like, well, what else? You know, and I mean, I remember rice cereal as well, just from being like a big sister.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I never. It's crazy because like those rice cereals, not only are they hard for the baby to digest, they're completely deficient in nutrients,
Literally.
like
Or vitamins.
yeah, minerals.
Minerals.
They're
Like it's rice.
it's like a junk food. It's a baby junk food.
Yeah.
Yeah. And think about what it does to their glycemic index. Like think
Right.
about the glucose response they
Right.
have to just eating a bunch of like carbs.
Which is something that we need to be thinking about as parents. Like the more
Yes.
I'm having to engage with that with my body
Mm.
and realizing, oh, if I'm as an adult having a insulin response or a glucose response to carbs, my children are too.
Yeah.
And it's really starting to challenge like what I am offering my
Yeah.
kids, you know, and even though they're a little bit past that
Mm.
newborn or that first year stage, but I'm just like, I'm looking at the way I've allowed certain foods for even Zara at this point, and I'm starting to learn more through my body and my experience. Like, oh, you're hungry still because all you had was fruit, or you're hungry still because all you had was bread, you know,
or you're irritable because you had a bunch of fruit snacks, and now your blood sugar is crashing.
Yes. Yeah. I'm even thinking about that for Ellie as a 2.5-year-old. I was reading some information about the fact that they can have glucose crashes and like iron deficiencies. I'm like, oh my gosh, my children could have iron deficiency. I didn't even like.
I was deficient when I was a little girl.
I didn't know there was a thing.
Yeah, I used to have to drink iron with apple juice when I was a little girl.
Wow.
Yeah, I was iron deficient until I was postpartum with Flora. And I started like I got into the liver trend, and I started like eating red meat and stuff. I was literally I was so iron deficient I couldn't like donate blood when I was in high school.
Wow. And did you get a blood work done to discover that? I assume.
Yeah,
as
I got
a
blood
kid?
work done when I was I got blood work done when I was a kid because on iron supplements when I was a little girl, which is just crazy. I literally remember like because apple juice was like a treat in our house, and being able to like drink apple juice.
Oh,
I was drink my iron.
Oh yeah.
And then I remember
which I'm drinking iron right now.
That's right,
in this
that's right.
pregnancy. I'm
Were
doing
you drinking
liquid
juice?
with orange juice,
Yeah,
just like a little
just-
shot of
yeah,
orange juice
yeah.
because it's some
It's gnarly.
strong.
It's gnarly.
It's very gnarly.
And then in high school, I remember being iron deficient because I couldn't. I had a program called the Medical Academy that I was a part of.
That's
when I was
cool.
in high school. Yeah, I was like the president of HOSA when
Look
I
at
graduated.
you.
I like always like loved just like science and medicine.
Oh,
and
I love that.
so I remember like I would help put on these like blood draw like things. Like we'd have the truck come in, and I'd always try to donate. And like almost every time they tested me, they're like, "Your iron's too low to donate."
Wow.
And so I wasn't on an iron. I think I tried going on an iron supplement and made me constipated when I was in high school, and I was just like, "Oh." So I just like didn't do anything about it. Then I became vegetarian.
Okay. Oh my god.
So then my whole way through college, I'm like vegetarian / vegan on and off,
which would have been horrifying for your iron levels. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't have red meat like ever. Ever like probably like 6 years.
Wow.
Then I get pregnant with Flora, And my midwives say, I was really worried about tearing. It's like my number one concern is like, I don't want to tear. She's like, you better start eating meat. And I was like, done. Because of collagen.
Oh.
So I started, not that it helped because I had torn every single time.
Oh my gosh.
Torn every time.
Yeah.
No matter how much meat I'm eating, boom, open, torn. But I started eating more animal based, and then I started eating really animal based, and then I started taking beef liver, and now like I've never had low iron again. Beef liver is super high, and B vitamins and an iron. So I take that, and now I'm on this like female support, like a female cycle support.
Yeah, through Perfect Supplements. Does it have high iron in it?
Yeah.
Oh,
because it has beef liver, and then it has like all these other like female reproductive tissues.
That's probably something else. So we were talking about the developmental place that the gut is at for babies,
right?
And why it's important to hold off on certain types of food and really focus on fat and protein.
Yes.
Which I think is really helpful information for people to hear, and also understanding why, like, the detriment that it can have by introducing grains a little too early.
Yes.
Or starchy.
Right. If I was to talk to someone who was nervous about baby-led weaning, these would be the things I would tell them. Number one, you can actually just like feed your baby what you're eating.
Yeah.
If you're not eating a bunch of processed foods, like yesterday or this morning, breakfast, right? I'm doing like yogurt, granola bowls for my kids, and I have a banana there. Bananas are pretty easy to digest. I never see them in her poop. Just slice a little bit of bananas, put them on her tray. There you go. Yesterday for lunch, I was making my kids like turkey and brie sandwiches, and I have some like free range, like organic turkey. Cut a few pieces, put it on her plate. She was like eating that,
Yeah.
And then for dinner, I made this like lamb pot pie kind of.
Oh my gosh, that sounds.
It's really good.
That sounds
amazing. Yeah, we scarfed it down, but I was just literally grabbing ground up lamb and just like sprinkling ground up lamb on her plate.
This is my question, and I bet you other people have this question. You did a reel recently of her baby-led weaning, and one of the items that you let her chomp on was like the Mongolian beef.
Oh, you mean beef bulgogi?
Was it beef bulgogi? Yeah, like I'm sorry. You're probably you're right.
But it's similar.
But it being kind of like what looked like a very chewy, pretty decent sized piece of meat, and I, in the video, like she's chewing on it. So how do you handle that kind of texture and that kind of size of food? Because I think where the anxiety goes for a lot of moms is things like that. Like, how do you navigate
how big of a chunk?
Yeah,
I think that's legit. And so for the beef bulgogi, that was like a pretty tough like strip of beef.
Yeah.
When they're like younger, I would give my kids like even like whole bones, like a whole like chicken bone, like to gnaw on, because they can't really tear any chunks off.
Right.
They're kind of like exploring texture, exploring flavor. It's not so much like I expect
like you're
you
eating
to eat a whole shrimp or a whole. But I actually did take that piece of bulgogi away because now she has two little teeth in the bottom, and she was getting chunks out of it. And I was like, oh, I'm going to have to just cut this up for you.
Okay.
So you want to cut it up into like, there's actually like a rule of thumb here of like how big of a piece you want. I'm just going to tell moms, figure that out on your own. Yeah. Google that.
Yeah.
But I just kind of like tear it up, or I have a pair of like kitchen shears and I'll cut it up in little pieces.
Okay.
Once she can actually tear chunks off of it, I can't just give her a big slab.
Okay.
But when they're little and they don't have teeth, like I would take like a big slab of steak like this big and like put it on the tray for them, like, and they would just or like a whole celery stick,
right?
Just because it felt good on their gums.
Yeah.
Just like gnaw on and
that makes sense. Because I'm like, I was watching, I was like, oh my god,
what's she
gonna do with that? What's she gonna do with that?
I took it out and I stood it up for her. Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yes,
it's helpful. Okay, good, because I definitely feel like I've always been more.
That's actually a good topic though, about being worried about choking. I've talked about this before, and I actually have a whole blog post on my website, flourishingmotherhood.com, all about baby-led weaning. I think the title of it is why you shouldn't give your kids, or the truth about rice cereals. I think that's actually the title of it. But I explain about how our gag reflex is in the back, like the very back of our throat. So if I like shove a toothbrush in your mouth, you would like gag once it hit the back. Yeah. A baby would gag at like half that distance because their gag reflex is located much further up on their tongue. Okay. So when I watch Meadow take a piece of sardine and stick it in her mouth and she's like choking. Right. Sometimes, and of course, I'm not trying to like deter moms from like intervening when their kid's choking. Right. I will say that I'm watching them gag, but it does look like they're choking sometimes. Right. And I typically just like stop what I'm doing and I look at them and watch. And then start like chewing on it. It's almost like they're like a cow like chewing a cud. I think that like it's concerning to watch a baby gag because we're thinking about our own gags. Where it's concerning to watch what it looks like a baby is choking. But if they're like making noises, like if like the silent chokes are really what you have to be concerned about. But I just think that a lot of times if the parent could like take a deep breath and let their kid work through it, their babies
usually brings it right back up. Yeah,
but of course, like it's really hard to speak about something like this on a podcast
and standardize that.
Right.
Totally.
You have to be, of course, to be aware of your kids. But I think that the whole choke, that parents worry about choking way more than they should, just because they don't understand the anatomy of a baby's mouth and how their reflex systems work. Babies are designed to survive. Like we can trust their instincts. Like if they are like gagging on something, it's so they can like keep processing that and then trying to swallow it again.
So smart.
Yeah.
So cool. That's awesome. We just are trying to capture some of the most asked questions about baby-led weaning. Talk about some of your, now if you are following Meg on Instagram, you're going to see on her reels that she posts some really great visuals for different foods that you can introduce. But what would you say, like when you're just talking to a mom walking play date, some of the first foods you would recommend for introducing solids through baby-led weaning? What are like your top favorite foods?
So I can just say this. I'll start with like what I always introduce to my kids first. And that's sardines, because fish oils, like those omega-3s are so good for your baby's brain.
Yeah.
Like it is crazy how like those fish oils are like brain food.
Wow.
So, and sardines are easy. You don't have to do any prep. You open a can and you like sprinkle on their plate, and that's one of your kids' first foods. Like they're going to be really well adapted to that flavor.
That's true.
And if you don't have access to sardines, I put cod liver oil on Meadow's eggs. Eggs are a really good one. Scrambled eggs, super easy, baby-led weaning.
And would you also recommend starting with just the yolk?
I used to think that, but now they're finding out that the egg white, they're worried about allergies, but actually introducing allergens earlier on is actually better for them to not have an allergy later.
Okay.
So like what they used to recommend is to wait until baby's a year to do egg yolks, but now they're not saying that anymore.
Or egg whites,
Egg whites.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, eggs are a good
And again,
one.
if you're doing high quality, like quality is also very important. Pasture raised.
Yeah, I had a bunch of people freak out on my reels because they saw that I was just doing the liquid of the egg yolk at first. Like when Meadow was like 6 months, I like sunny side up an egg.
Yeah.
Or I like over easied it.
Yeah.
And then I like just was like, and they're like, don't give your kids like unprocessed egg yolks. I'm like, dude, that bacteria that you're worried about is actually living on the shell of the egg, not on the inside. These eggs are from my own backyard. So number one, I know that like my chickens are not likely to have salmonella. Number two, if you wash them in like hot soapy water before you cook them, you're killing that
Right.
So I wouldn't worry about it. I think it's good to note that like I'm not an anxious mom. A lot of other moms, I see these like fears they have, and I'm like, wouldn't even think about that. You know, so I tend to just believe everything's gonna be fine.
Yeah.
So eggs are a really easy one for me to introduce to my kids.
And the yolk that's like running is so buttery and yummy.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. That's like giving them liquid gold.
It's so good for them. It's so good. Opens again fats. I have another blog on fats being really good for your baby's brain.
Yeah.
What's another one that I do early on?
I know avocado usually.
Oh, I do avocado early on. Yep. And they always process that really well. I do, you know what I did recently? Smoked oysters.
Yeah.
That are in olive oil.
Right.
I got
What
those.
was her review of it again?
Oh my gosh, I remember.
Did she love them?
Of rubber bands, flavor of the ocean.
Rubber bands, flavor of the ocean.
Those were so easy though, and she loved those. I'm trying to think of another.
That's like all I ate during Eliana's pregnancy
because they're super high in selenium and zinc. Really high in B vitamin.
Yeah.
Like you want to be giving your kids nutrient dense foods.
Right.
And so that's what I'm looking at. I'm like, if I'm paying money for food, which goodness knows, we're paying a lot of money for food.
100%. Yeah.
Are they going to be able to absorb it? Like, is this going to be bioavailable for them? I'm not talking about kale. I'm talking about things that their body can break down and absorb and use. And so things like sardines and oysters and beef liver, like I do beef liver pate. Beef liver pate, I don't think you can qualify as baby-led weaning because it's like it's a puree.
Yeah, it's puree. Yeah.
And you're spoon feeding it. But what I do is I take that beef liver pate and I mix it into her scrambled eggs and I dump it on her plate. Or I mix it into her sardines and I dump it on her plate. Or I mix it into like I'll shred some steak or some chicken and I mix it in and I dump it. I have very little time am I sitting there spoon feeding Meadow.
Okay.
But yeah, so I also like just like steak, like cooking a steak or like pot roast. Like I did like a pot roast the other day. and just like kind of like flaking that meat apart and
Yeah,
spacing it on
smart.
your plate. I do a lot of meat.
What about like just butter?
So I don't do butter until they're a year old.
Really?
Yeah, I
Let's talk
don't
about that.
do dairy
Okay.
until they're a year old.
Okay. Even
Um,
butter. Interesting.
Even butter. Yeah, that could just be a me thing. You know what
Okay.
I've wanted to do? I've wanted to like skim the cream off my breast milk and make like breast milk butter.
Yeah, I've been seeing that
Yeah,
on
isn't that
social
cool?
media. I'm like, oh my God.
My fat layer is like an algae layer of a pond.
You'd have to like have a week's worth of it just to make something.
Oh yeah, and I would get like this much from it. My milk is so lean.
So talk a little bit more about that, because butter, I've heard like, because I was kind of into like the carnivore thing at one point, and so there's been like some carnivore based mamas who have talked about what they give their babies, and butter has been one of the things. And so do you feel like butter, because it has a high allergen, that you, even though like eggs would be kind of similar in that, why not butter a little bit?
So
especially if it's raw.
Right. If I make my own raw butter, I've given that to her before. If
Okay.
I'm doing like it normally when you buy like Kerrygold and stuff, it's like pasteurized milk.
True.
Which is just hard to digest in general.
True.
So
Okay.
if it's pasteurized, I wouldn't give it to her.
Okay.
And then when it comes to the raw stuff, because our raw milk is like lab tested,
Right.
I'm more willing to give it to her. But because she just gets so much dairy from me,
True.
she's like still breastfeeding a lot.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just like not high on my priorities. I do tallow. She's eating a lot of tallow.
Tallow. Okay.
So like she does that, but like I'm just like not. I just like don't really do dairy with my kids until they're about a year old, just because if they are a little sensitive, like
I guess it would make more sense to do maybe like coconut oil.
Yeah.
Like, because you see a lot of coconut oil mixed in like the base of even like Serenity's food or like olive oil or something, if you're wanting to get fat in.
Right. Yeah. I mainly just like do tallow. I pretty much do tallow for everything.
That's smart.
I have so much tallow in my freezer and my refrigerator.
Okay.
Because I save it. I make so much bone broth.
Yeah.
I'm always saving that. Or like, oh, you know what? Whipped bone marrow.
Yeah, you did a video on that recently.
Yeah, that is such an easy recipe. So that, once again, I don't know if you could qualify that under baby-led weaning. I do.
Okay.
But you literally get bones and you roast them, and all of that marrow melts out. Marrow is like animal butter. It melts out of the bones, and then you take the bones off. You can make bone broth with the bones if you want to, but you just scrape off that marrow, or you just pour. You literally just pour marrow through like a sieve, and and then if you wanted to, like it will harden like butter. Yeah, so it'll be like nice and hard like butter. But what I did with mine was I put it into my KitchenAid mixer and I whipped it. Yeah, and then it's like, I don't know, like a whipped.
Yeah, I would still just plop that right on the high chair and let them put their fingers through it and lick it. And
and I've put it in. Like I've used it like any way that you use butter. I've just used bone marrow.
Okay,
and it's also like really, really high in vitamins and minerals.
So smart.
It's like brain food. It's just so good. It's like the most nutrient parts of animals. So I'm going to give you a little background on like how I started like realizing foods were nutrient dense. Okay. When I was postpartum with Flora, I was staying at my friend Abby's house, and it's just like literally like I feel like this is like a God moment. But I'm like sitting in, like I got her to sleep, and I'm like sitting in this guest bedroom, and I just see Weston A. Price's book, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. That was a good title of the book. And it's in Abby's room, and so I pull it out and I start like just like kind of like thumbing through the pictures. So Weston A. Price was basically this like anthropological nutritional dentist. Right. He was a dentist, but he went to these like unreached people groups and he studied their teeth and their nutrition. And he wrote this amazing book. He has a whole foundation now, the Weston A. Price Foundation. They have so much free resources. This is like such a great free resource for people. Yeah. And even there's been like baby-led weaning cookbooks that have come out of this movement about nutrient-dense foods. But what he really focused on was how introducing like high B vitamins and fats and minerals really changed not just the population of people, but how like they developed in utero. So as I was reading through this book, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration, I was realizing that all of these like tribal groups that were really doing it well when it came to nutrition saved the organ meats and the bones and the fats for pregnant women and like the sick, the elderly. Like they saved these organ meats and bones. Like that was the most prized part of the animal. It wasn't these muscle meats. It was all these other parts that we kind of view as weird or gross. Like, I've gotten so many comments talking about how gross it is that like we give our kids liver and then we like eat liver and like we like save the bones, and how like, oh, you're feeding a dog. Well, like dogs actually are eating a lot better than most Americans, unfortunately.
It's so true. It's so true.
But it was cool to be able to read about just like, from this anthropological standpoint of how our ancestors ate, ancestral eating, and how much better that is for us than like the way that we're eating now.
Yeah.
Because even the way that the baby's palate is developed, when they're baby-led weaning and they're chewing on food and they're using both sides of their mouth, their tongue is moving their food back and forth.
Yeah.
That is developing their mouth.
Right.
And it's developing a wider palate. Like, but the more pressure you have to like chomp on food, the wider your palate gets, which your palate, like your fontanelles, are two plates that kind of come together and they can separate.
Right.
And so when you're just giving a baby pureed food and all they're doing is sucking, that sucking motion, it creates a bubble palate, it creates a higher palate, which creates mouth breathing, which creates crowded teeth, which means that you end up needing braces. Like all of these like things can happen. I know. Okay.
The trifecta.
Yes.
I know. I was like holding Ellie this morning. I'm just being triggered right now because she was like breathing through her mouth on my face this morning. And I'm like, Ellie, close your mouth.
Yeah.
Close your mouth, breathe through your nose. But her nose is so stuffy. And I'm like, oh, and Ellie has the high palate and the narrow palate. And, you know, we're right there.
Yeah.
And it's just crazy to think about what we've seen as normal, even just like going through high school and everyone having like braces, just like this whole culture of like the braces and all that stuff. I didn't actually.
Me neither. Yeah,
look at us.
Look at us.
Look at us.
One thing we have going
look
for
at
us.
us. But I think there's still some issues there, but somehow I was able to bypass braces and I don't have a extremely high palate, but something's off there because what I've noticed is that my tongue is bigger than my palate. So I have these like ridges on the side of my tongue. So there's still some stuff there, but I definitely was able to bypass some of those things. But just culturally, like, again, we all just grew up like with this like system that we all fall into. It's like, oh, okay, you have crooked teeth, you have this, now you get braces. And our generation, this current time, it's just like so much is being brought to the light.
We're so disconnected from like our ancestors and the way that things are meant to be.
And I've seen some of Weston A. Price's information on the jaw, the teeth, the comparison from now till then. And it is really shocking when you see the comparisons of what he was able to document from other decades to now.
In one generation of introducing
one generation.
One generation, you see people with these beautiful, wide teeth and smiles to these crowded, narrow, like long faces. And
we're the generation. I mean, all of us, like so many of us are coming out with kids with tongue ties and lip ties and palate issues.
That's something that I had to really process when because I found that book after Flora was born.
Right.
And so I was like, my next pregnancy is I'm eating nutrient-dense foods, which, you know, I like threw up my whole pregnancy. There was like hardly any control.
Yes.
But I tried as hard as I could to have nutrient-dense foods in between. And a lot of my kids have had to get procedures done. And that was disappointing. So I was like, I did the best I could. You know,
I try to give them my best.
So I would say that like overall, don't complicate things.
Yeah.
So fats and proteins, right? Like think about it in the sense of like eggs, avocado, steak, sardines, shredded meats, like pot roast, like those like little oyster things, like just
bone
like
broth, gelatin.
Bone broth, yes. Fats and proteins are mainly what I would stick around. Like I do a banana every once in a while. I'll do a carrot every once in a while. I'll do like little things like that that are like
peas,
really
soft.
Soft and things that aren't super high fiber or complex carbohydrates. That's what I stick to. But like introduce them to food that you're eating. Like if I made a butter chicken, which I'm probably gonna make soon, like I would like probably rinse off some of those pieces and like having her introduced to spices and those flavor profiles. Organ meats are super high in nutrients, so I always have organ meats thrown in there. But if you're not super comfortable with organ meats, you can buy that perfect supplements like dried liver and dried organ meats and sprinkle it on top. If you're not,
so smart.
If you don't know where to find sardines, which by the way, Wild Planet is my favorite brand of sardines that's sold at Costco.
Yeah.
But if you're not familiar with sardines, then buy cod liver oil. The only brand I'd ever recommend for buying cod liver oil. Rosita comes in a bottle and it comes in soft pills. My kids and I take the soft pills nearly every day. My baby gets that like the cod liver oil. It has a strong smell, but it's really good for them. So that's what I'd stick to. For some of the resources they could use, I have a baby-led weaning blog up on flourishingmotherhood.com. I have Why You Should Feed Your Kids More Butter blog on flourishingmotherhood.com. I have 3 baby-led weaning videos that are on my Instagram.
Nice.
And I have a highlight reel that like where I'm introducing Meadow to like new foods that I can think of.
Awesome.
I also have a lot of things linked on there. If you're looking for a already dried and processed, or like a desiccated option for your kids. Earthly has a desiccated oysters that I use, which are linked to my bio, and Perfect Supplements has desiccated liver and desiccated multiple organ meats, like glandular organ meats. And then the books I would recommend that are really good, there's one by Sally Fallon called Nourishing Traditions. It is such a good book. I literally have given that book away multiple times.
Yeah.
She comes from the Weston A. Price mindset of like nourishing foods.
Okay.
And Weston A. Price's book, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. That's Weston A. Price's book. So those would be some really good resources to start with.
Yeah.
And hopefully I'll have a YouTube video up soon. I'm going to start to do long form YouTube videos.
And you're going to be working on a book?
A baby-led weaning ebook. Yes. So right now my ebooks, actually, it wouldn't be a bad place to start. I have like a ebook that's like a bundle, and it has bone broth, organ meats, and fermented foods.
Yep.
And so that's like a good place to start if you want something now, because I actually have recipes in there of like beef liver meatballs, which are a really easy way to get beef liver in your kid's diet, and you can't taste them. It's like a hidden liver meatball.
Yeah.
And I actually have something on my website of a chocolate muffin that has beef liver in there.
Oh, smart.
And chocolate really covers up the taste of liver.
Wow.
Yeah. So those are some resources I pass on.
So check out flourishingmotherhood.com.
Yes.
Check out your Stan store, the link in your bio. That's where you're going to find those digital products. And if you're going to be buying anything from Perfect Supplements, code Flourish10 gets you 10% off. Yes.
And if you buy bulk, so I buy 6 at a time because I'm just a part of a big family now, I get 25% off plus my 10% off. I have to use my own code.
Right.
So it's 35% off, and already really affordable supplement because it's a family-owned business.
Yeah.
And they're glyphosate tested, like residual glyphosate tested, and they're organic. They're just it's just such a good product.
Yeah, it's I think it's 3 items, 3 of their items. That's when you get 25% off.
No, 20% off for 3 items, 25% off for 6.
Oh, 25%
with 10%. Yeah.
Oh, and this is a place where you can get your collagen, you can get your bone broth powder, gelatin powder, which I love from there. You can also get the beef liver
in pills
organs,
or in the sprinkle form. You can get your multi-organ meats in pills or in the sprinkle
which I love having the sprinkle form for cooking. It's like if I'm doing ground beef, ground lamb, if I'm having a soup like that, I'm sprinkling that in there.
And that's really great for B vitamins and iron.
Yes.
It's just like the best life hack. If you do not want to be dealing with organs, if that makes you uncomfortable, you need to be buying these because it should be a part of your diet. If you're eating muscle meats, you need to be also consuming bone broth and organ meats because they balance each other out.
Yep.
They balance out the inflammation that you get from eating muscle meats are balanced by eating bone broth and organ meats.
Wow.
So it should be a part of everyone's diet.
Look at that. Things they don't teach us in school.
Yeah.
We should start a whole series on that. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Made to Flourish podcast. And we hope that this helps you start your baby-led weaning journey.